Hello everyone. As you can see here, we have a lit penny stove that is completely primed and ready to use. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to build one of these for yourself, and then afterwards, I will be going into the woods and showing you how you can put these into use. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so here's everything that we will need for this project. First off, you will need 2 aluminum cans. This is what we will build the penny stove out of. You will also need a pair of scissors, a sharp knife, a clamp, a block of wood, a thumbtack, and a penny. We're going to be using our block of wood in order to mount our knife 1 inch off of the table. Since I only had 1/2 inch blocks, I just stacked 2 together. Now that our knife has been mounted into place, we can begin to score our aluminum cans. I do this by simply pressing down on the can so it stays firmly on the table while I rotate it around the cutting edge of the knife. Since my knife has a relatively steep beveled edge, I do not want to penetrate the can at this point. By scoring the can with my knife, I'm essentially just putting a seam around the outside, which I will use as a guide later. Next, I will compress the top of the can as much as possible in order to prep it for the scissors. Then, we will simply use the scissors to cut off the top in this location. Fun fact, the small ping-pong-looking ball inside of stout cans is called a widget. The purpose of this is to release CO2 into the beer, giving nitro stouts their signature style of carbonation. Anyways, getting back on topic, the next thing we're going to do is use our scissors to make a cut all the way down to our seam, but not past. You want to end your cut right at the seam. Once we get to this point, we're going to allow that score that we made earlier to work for us. And we're just going to peel the center section of the can away. Now, at this point, I have cut 2 cans, and I have 1 inch remaining at the bottom of each can. You're going to need to choose which can you would like to have on the inside and which can you would like to have on the outside. Once you have done this, I like to manipulate the side walls of the can that is going to be on the inside just a little bit to loosen them up. Next, create an indent on the can that you are going to be inserting inside the other. This should allow the cans to come together. Finally, squeeze the cans together until the indent is no longer exposed. This will allow your cans to have a tight seal. Next, we are going to be punching the holes in our stove. When you begin punching your holes, it is very important that you make them on the same side of the can that the exposed seam from where we cut the can is located. While priming your stove, a small amount of alcohol may come out of this seam, so if you have this upside down, you're going to lose a lot more due to gravity. To create these holes, I will be using the thumbtack that I mentioned earlier. So I always start by punching a group of holes in the center of the top of my can. This is where we are going to be fueling the stove. So for this particular stove, I have chosen to make 5 holes. There's no mandatory amount of holes required, but if you only do 1, it's going to take you a long time to fill this thing. Now, as you can see here, I am laying out the locations of the holes. These are the locations where the flames will be coming from once our stove is fully primed. In this section of the can, the aluminum is slightly thicker, so I like to use one of my blocks as a hammer to help me drive the tack into the material. It is not mandatory, but I like to mark a lot of my holes before I make them in order to be more accurate, or at least on center. Also, this isn't mandatory either, but I like to sand off my marks when I'm finished to get a better look at what I've done. And that is our finished product. So why don't we light this thing? For fuel, I'm going to be using 91% isopropyl alcohol. Truly, the higher percent alcohol, the better. But 91% is pretty good, so this will do. To fuel, you simply pour the alcohol into the initial holes that we created. Once the fueling holes no longer accept alcohol, you know your stove is full. This is the location where you will light it. Once your stove is lit, you will cover the fueling holes with a penny. This will prevent alcohol from coming out of those holes in the future and force it to exit through the holes around the outside of the can. When priming your stove, it is important to have the fuel filled to a point where it is starting to leak out of the holes around the outside of the can. Here is an example of what happens when you underfill your stove. In this situation, there was not enough fuel above the penny in order to prime the stove. This resulted in the flame going out because there was not enough pressure buildup in order to force more alcohol out of the holes around the outside of the can. Here is an example of a properly fueled stove. Notice when I slightly move it side to side, alcohol comes out of the holes around the border. So now, let's try lighting this thing again. You'll notice that immediately some alcohol catches on fire outside of the stove. This is okay. It will help in the priming process. As the stove primes, the alcohol inside of it will begin to boil. This will create vapor, which will catch fire when it exits the holes around the border of the stove. Here you can see the stove continuing to prime. And as the last bits of alcohol slowly burn off around the outside of the stove, you can see now that we have a fully primed stove. Now that we have successfully built our penny stove, I say we grab a few more, go out into the woods, and see what we can do with them.
Mm.